The story begins with John's sadness over the death of his friends while he was still active in a special unit called Falcon. The regret and trauma he experienced had lasted a long time and turned John into an alcoholic. Even when his alcohol supply ran low, John would immediately go to the liquor store to restock. However, at that moment, the liquor store John visited was being targeted by robbers, and the robbers, unaware of John's brutality, tried to provoke him, but suddenly, John's resistance suddenly stopped when he worried that he would kill again, like he had done before, and in the end, he let the robbers pass out and hurried home. When night came, John's headaches returned, accompanied by memories of his past when he could kill people so easily. However, instead of taking the medicine prescribed by his doctor, he preferred to work out until he was exhausted while trying to forget his dark past. The next day, John was visited by his sister Cindy. This woman who worked in social services had traveled all the way from Brazil to America to see John after several years of not seeing each other.
I'm sorry.
Their brief meeting continued when Cindy took John to an expensive restaurant. There, Cindy told him that she had grown comfortable living in Brazil, even though she lived in a dangerous area. According to her, the area called favela had a high crime rate. However, Cindy asked John not to worry because so far no one had ever done anything bad to her. Until the next day, Cindy, who was returning to Brazil, couldn't bear to wake John, who looked very tired, and not wanting to miss her flight, Cindy finally left without saying goodbye to her brother. A few days passed and the story shifted to the small town of Favela in Brazil. Although it was a small town, it was actually a hotbed for criminals, drug lords, and gangsters. The black market has become so widespread in this city that even young children routinely engage in drug transactions as if they were buying food. Meanwhile, the city's beloved policewoman Favela is patrolling amid the hustle and bustle of residents who are familiar with her. Suddenly, a panicked child approaches her and urges her to go to the beach immediately. It was truly unexpected that Cindy, who we saw yesterday looking fine, was now badly beaten and lying in a coma. The two police officers quickly called an ambulance to take Cindy to the hospital. Then the story shifts to the U.S. Deputy Ambassador to Brazil, Manny. After Cindy was found on the beach, Manny was approached by two police officers from the capital regarding the incident. This official, who was also John's friend, looked shocked when he saw Cindy badly beaten, like a victim of torture. While the police officer named Thiago was not particularly surprised, especially since Cindy's job as a social worker meant she would always be dealing with bad people. Without wasting any time, Manny immediately contacted John to inform him of what had happened to Cindy.
What happened? I'm on my way.
On the other hand, the policewoman who found Cindy's body was handing out drinks while looking for clues to find the perpetrator who put Cindy in a coma. She tried to find out from the young people there, hoping to find someone suspicious. Then suddenly they were startled by Thiago's actions as he arrested thugs who were carrying firearms.
Hey,
the gang leader was upset because his men had not caused any trouble, let alone killed anyone. And while they were arguing, Catarina's arrival made Thiago angry because this area was clearly her responsibility. He also mentioned Cindy's case, which Catarina had not yet been able to solve. Because the situation had become chaotic, Thiago negotiated by challenging their representative to a duel with one of his men who was skilled in capoeira. If Thiago lost, he would not raid the residence again, but if Thiago won, he would conduct more frequent checks in this area. After they agreed, Carlo immediately took action.
Não prenda esse homem.
After delivering a stunning kick, Carlo finally managed to win the impromptu duel, and in the end, the gangsters were now unable to move against the police. Then the story shifted to John, who had just arrived in Brazil wearing his signature outfit, and his arrival was greeted by Manny, who immediately took him to the hospital. John suddenly felt weak when he saw his only sister lying helplessly in a coma, and shortly thereafter, Thiago arrived and explained that Cindy had most likely been robbed because she was found without her wallet or jewelry. Unsatisfied with Thiago's answer, John insisted on going to the scene of the crime and investigating it himself. In short, Thiago took John to the scene where Cindy was found. And along the way, Thiago told him about how rampant drug dealers were in his area. Even the mafia openly sold women to satisfy the desires of lecherous men. Upon arriving near the crime scene, they met Katerina. And since this was Katerina's territory, Thiago asked Katerina to accompany John to the scene where Cindy was found. While checking the crime scene, John's attention was drawn to a young man wearing a necklace, similar to the one Cindy had worn, but since he couldn't ask him where he got it, John ignored him and returned to the hospital. While at the hospital, John noticed the suspicious behavior of the nurse who was injecting medicine into his sister's IV. The beautiful nurse asked John to be patient because she felt that Cindy would surely recover soon. But shortly thereafter, John saw that something was wrong with Cindy.
Come back.
In the midst of his panic, John recounted the nurse's previous actions. But from the conversation between the nurse and the doctor, John finally realized that the nurse who had entered earlier had been deliberately instructed by someone else to ruin the situation in order to cause his sister's death. The next day, John returned to the crime scene to continue his investigation, and when he saw the young man from yesterday, he tried to interrogate him.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me.
When the young man was cornered, John asked where the young man named Kuka got the necklace he was wearing, and because he didn't get an answer, John gave him several blows. When John kept asking about the necklace, Katerina tried to mediate because Kuka couldn't speak English. After telling Kuka that John was Cindy's brother, Katerina explained that Kuka's younger sister was Cindy's good friend, and when Kuka's sister was kidnapped, Cindy gave Kuka the necklace. Hearing this explanation, John immediately apologized for being violent towards Kuka. After everything was explained, Kuka gave John Cindy's diary, which he had found at the crime scene. Kuka hoped that the book would give John clues about what had happened.
Thank you.
When night fell, John was in a bad mood because part of Cindy's diary was torn and faded, and thanks to his mischievous behavior, he saw that Cindy had met with a photographer before the assault. He then rushed to contact the person, hoping to get some clues, and luckily the photographer named Bruno was willing to meet with John.
I've been so freaked out since I've heard.
In short, John met Bruno, who immediately told him about his meeting with Cindy, where Bruno was asked to be the photographer for Cindy's activity of interviewing members of a woman trafficking ring. When the police assumed that the kidnapping victims were dead, Cindy suspected that the female victims were actually being used to satisfy the sexual desires of lecherous men. Throughout Bruno's story, he appeared anxious, fearing that his meeting with John would be discovered by the mafia. However, after giving John a copy of the photos, Bruno hurriedly left, and suddenly, after Bruno's death, John now had to be extra vigilant because Cindy's assailants could target him next. Soon after, John suddenly saw a Japanese woman who was undoubtedly the perpetrator who had planted the bomb in Bruno's car. After failing to capture the Japanese woman, John and Manny saw the person Cindy had interviewed. Then when John discussed the characteristics of the shooters, Manny was convinced that they were a Yakuza gang, and it turned out that the Yakuza had been present in Brazil for 70 years. Then from one of their photos, they saw that Cindy's interview location was in front of a bar in the city of Favela. Without wasting any time, John immediately searched for the man in the photo. While inside the bar, John realized that the person he was looking for was a disc jockey, and after punching him as an introduction, John forced the man named Lima to admit to his meeting with Cindy. However, because Lima chose to remain silent, John treated him very brutally. Unable to bear the stench, Lima finally confessed that he was a smuggler of used goods overseas. One day, Cindy saw Lima conducting a transaction with a client, and for that reason, she continued to approach him and interviewed him. Lima said that his client was the one who had beaten Cindy up. Then, without mentioning his name, Lima told John the address where he could find the person he was referring to. After obtaining this information, John left with all of Lima's smuggling documents. The next day, Thiago directed a large number of troops to crack down on the gangs roaming the favela, hoping that this mission would also reveal who was behind Cindy's assault. Meanwhile, at the same time, John planned to go to the location of the perpetrator previously provided by Lima while showing Lima's files to Manny. However, when they checked the files, Manny said that they were all fake, and in the end, they were puzzled by what Lima had actually smuggled.
Abre tus ojos y odia para nós descansamos nossa súplica esperante tua. Amém.
In the midst of cracking down on criminals, a member saw several women being smuggled by Japanese people.
Officer requesting backup.
When the Japanese were no longer able to resist, the members rushed to call Thiago, who immediately ordered all members to stay where they were while he checked on the member who had just reported the incident.
Okay.
Unexpectedly, Thiago had been working with the smugglers, and to cover up his crime, he staged the incident to make it look like the member had been killed by the criminals. Back to John, who has now arrived at a resort inhabited by women who have been sold by the mafia. John then tells Manny to go home because he is going to look for the person Lima mentioned. While inside the resort, John discovers that all the employees are Japanese. And because John is just standing around looking confused with his suitcase, he ends up being suspected by a woman named Tomo. She is shocked to discover that the person her friends mentioned is his sister Cindy, and afterwards she asks security to eliminate him immediately. When John is suddenly told to wait, he sees that his sister Kuka is still alive and has just been brought to this place. Seeing many young women in this place, John suspected that this place was their main hideout for smuggling young women. While John was being hunted by her troops, Anna immediately contacted her boss, and upon hearing the report, a man named Hirimoto already suspected this because he had arrested Lima, who had allowed John to take his cargo. Now it was time for Hirimoto to punish Lima for hindering his smuggling operation.
He can't cut the...
On the other hand, John was trying to escape to immediately report to the police about the whereabouts of the women who were going to be smuggled by the gang.
Copy, 304 en rota.
What's going on?
When the police arrived, John explained that his actions were an attempt to find the mastermind behind Cindy's abuse. Then he told them about his sister Kuka's whereabouts, along with the other kidnapping victims. But unfortunately, the young women who had been here earlier had disappeared, and in the end, John suspected that the young women had been taken away by the Japanese gang. Then John showed them the fake shipping documents, which he believed were just a cover to smuggle young women. But suddenly, Thiago asked why John didn't hand over Lima's documents to him. After obtaining the documents, Thiago told John to go home while he would continue his investigation at the dock. After they parted ways, John wondered how Thiago knew someone named Lima, and John finally suspected that Thiago was in cahoots with Lima and the Japanese mafia. John then asked Katerina to look after his sister in the hospital because he was going to follow Thiago, who said he was heading to the pier. In short, Thiago hurriedly took Lima's documents to smuggle young women into Japan. At the same time, Anna went to the hospital to kill Cindy, as ordered by Hirimoto. Fortunately, Katerina also arrived at the right time and killed her on the spot. A short time later, we returned to Thiago, who has arrived at the dock where Hirimoto usually exports Brazilian women to Japan. Unbeknownst to Thiago, John has managed to follow him by sneaking into the luggage compartment. After finding out everything, John quickly tells Manny what has happened. He then asked Manny to contact the police and immediately set up an ambush. But since the police usually arrived late, John tried to take down the smugglers first. After Carlo and Thiago were helpless, John then fought one-on-one with Hiramoto, who was the head of the Yakuza. In the middle of their fight, Hiramoto proudly admitted that he was the one who had tortured Cindy until she was battered and bruised. And in the end, hearing this, John, who was now overcome with rage, brutally killed Hiramoto. Afterwards, John approached Thiago, who immediately gave him the locker key. The corrupt police officer then said that inside the locker were evidence of corrupt officials and several companies controlled by Hiramoto. He also told John to immediately inform Katerina so that the officials could be dealt with by the police as soon as possible. But suddenly, after confirming that Hiramoto was truly dead, John returned Thiago's gun and hurried away, even though Thiago, who was deeply remorseful, was not yet satisfied with telling him everything. From the sound of the gunshot, John finally realized that Thiago had chosen death over undergoing the legal process and bearing the shame of his actions. A few days passed and John saw Cindy regain consciousness, but then faint again. The doctor said that Cindy's head injury still required a long healing process, which could take years and be very expensive. Because of this situation, John told Manny that he would need a lot of money for his sister's treatment. Then casually, Manny told John not to panic too much. As long as John was willing to rejoin his unit, all the costs would be covered. And the film ended.